We are live. Sweet. That is sweet. I finally got all the disgusting rotten fridges that I needed to get clean. That's what I spent my morning doing. There's a bug in my room. Oh, we got a great docket today. Great set of videos to watch and react to. Oh shoot, I forgot to do the intro that I wanted to do. Dang it. I had a video pulled up as a great intro video. Alright, I'm going to need you all to just pretend I'm not here. Okay. Pretend you never saw me and you're just opening the stream now.
Hồ Chí Minh, Hồ Chí Minh, Hồ Chí Minh, Hồ Chí Minh. Biển xa, người đi khắp phương trời. Ở nơi xa đó, người dân đói nghèo. Từ đau thương người đi khắp năm châu lòng tin mặt trời chân lý sáng soi. Dõi chiếu sáng dân mình, Hồ Chí Minh, Hồ Chí Minh, Hồ Chí Minh. Vượt trùng sông, người đi khắp phương trời, luyện tôi ý chí, lòng núi căm hờn. Hồ Chí Minh, người đi khắp năm châu lòng tin mặt trời chân lý sáng soi, dọi chiếu sáng dân mình. Hồ Chí Minh, Hồ Chí Minh, Hồ Chí Minh, Hồ Chí Minh.
How was that for an intro? That song is sick, and the music video is sick too. Viking Dave says, based Ho Chi Minh. I couldn't agree more, Dave. That was one of my favorite videos ever when I saw it. I'm like, we definitely have to play this on stream. Ho Chi Minh. Darn right. It's crazy they, like you don't learn much about Ho Chi Minh in school other than when they're like, the U.S. went to the Vietnam War. A lot of people were against it, but some people were for it because Ho Chi Minh was an evil dictator. That's like all they tell you about him. It's so absurd. Like, this guy who led his country in an anti-colonial struggle against the French and the Western colonizers asks the U.S. to come help them. Says, hey, the U.S., your Constitution says here that you support freedom and you support democracy. We're fighting against colonizers and oppression. Come help us fight for our freedom. But instead of responding to Ho Chi Minh by helping them overthrow the French colonizers, the U.S. invaded Vietnam and tried to take it as a colony from the French, dropping thousands of tons of Agent Orange and napalm, destroying a lot of their infrastructure, agriculture, farmland, forestry, pretty much everything you can imagine, making a really easy transition to socialism into a difficult transition to socialism. So the main video I want to watch today that I'm super excited about. So for those who don't know, Daniel Dumbrill is a bar owner in China. He lives in Shenzhen, China. where he owns a bar. But he got into politics and started creating YouTube videos a while back, years ago now. And he's acquired almost 170,000 subscribers by doing. He does some like travel vlogs, but most of what he does, or most of his, viral and super popular videos have been videos of him debunking Western lies about China. And in this video, he's with Robbie Barwick of the Australian Citizens Party, who was recently called out by a military think tank for harassing, supposedly, some of their speakers, for which he had to be kicked out, forcibly removed from an event. However, the video of this event was scrubbed from the internet. It was deleted by the military think tank, which is actually funded by the Australian government. So Daniel Dumbrill is going to have Robbie on his show to talk about this going down, how it went down, and actually play the video. And this is the end of a long hiatus for Daniel. He's been, I'm sure he's just been running his bar in Shenzhen, China, and has wanted to get away from the madness of geopolitics and, the America versus China craziness. So yeah, but he's back with this video and it's great. So let's check it out.
Welcome everyone to another video. I have been pulled out of what was a semi-political video retirement. I wasn't going to make political videos anymore. At least I didn't feel the urge to, for many different reasons. One of the reasons is because the situation in the world just seems like it is too obvious for people not to recognize on their own what's going on. But something unfolded that was just so spectacularly obvious, it really needs to be put out there for everybody to see. And also there's quite an entertainment value here. Now, I have Robbie Barwick with me, who many of you will remember. We've done a few episodes before. But now he's a very different Robbie Barwick, because now he is he abuses the human rights of human rights abusers. And well, you know what? This will require a little bit of setting up. Let's just read a few of the things that some of the people are saying about you here. So we've got, first of all, Sophie McNeil said, very disappointing that Vicky Hsu's observation was then quickly followed by an audience member who came along tonight with the sole intent of harassing her and causing trouble. That was you, Robbie. And Kevin chimed in and said, he has to say, male Chinese dissidents living overseas rarely get harassed the way that Vicky Hsu did or does. And don't tell me that misogyny isn't part of it here. All right, there's another name we can add to your list there, Robbie. Yep. And then we have another person. That Vicky should feel unsafe speaking at a public event in Australia is not okay at all. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I'm 100% in support of Vicky's vigorous participation in Australia's debate. To the harassers and trolls out there, bugger off, dickheads. Okay, sorry about that. We got.
So for those who don't understand what they said, or if you missed that, because I missed it the first time I watched the video, maybe I just wasn't paying attention well. But so those tweets are from people who work for this like Australian government-funded, military contractor-funded think tank, who's pushing the Uyghur genocide narrative, and who's pushing for more hostility and basically war with China. Then the U.S., Australia, and the UK have signed into this trilateral military agreement called AUKUS, which is basically just a threat to China. The U.S. and UK and Australia showing that they're united militarily, politically, and economically against China. So now this think tank, because Robbie Barwick went and asked them some questions, they're claiming that he harassed their speakers, and how sad it is that their, wonderful speakers have to deal with such harassment. So let's see the video.
Cut off there for a second. Anyways, so yeah, anyways, we get the picture. There's something very, very serious that obviously you did, which has everybody kind of up in arms. So we had an article even that came out. There was even a mainstream media journalist who came in from SBS News and said about you that you became quite agitated and stood up and started to walk towards her in a pretty confronting way. And so this is a quote from Leopold, and myself and Sophie McNeil from Human Rights Watch had to intervene. So now the issue here is, though, what you did was so terrible that they actually deleted the scene entirely from YouTube. They took it out of their video so that nobody else could see it. That's how terrible it was. Vicky obviously chimed in also and said that The events are interrupted. Speakers are harassed and intimidated, including herself, are not feeling safe. Now, I guess everybody's probably really curious about what you did and what you said. So maybe, again, I know this is a little bit of a long setup, but let's watch the video that was so terrible that it was censored off of their video, and everybody had to take their word for it, that you were a very menacing character. Let's give it a look.
Two questions for Vicky. The first is on the effectiveness of your weakness and salary report.
So this is not US, Australian military think tank conference, where they have this person from the Uyghur diaspora connected to the World Uyghur Congress, which is basically an arm of the NED, which is a CIA cutout, basically a privatized version of the CIA and an arm of the US State Department. And this is a guy from the Australian Citizens Party who just goes there and asks some very, very basic questions. And he's also got a legal document with him that they'll talk about later. But he's just going to stand up now and ask the speaker a few normal questions.
Identify manufacturing companies that have stopped using Uyghur labor because of your report. Maybe the speaker goes up to the work.
First of all, I would like to point out that last year during one of my trips to Melbourne to record Q&A, I ran into Robert at the airport, and in my opinion, I was ambushed, and he misrepresented our exchange on Twitter, and he accused me of wanting war with China. So I do not consider Robert to be here in good faith, and I refuse to answer his questions.
So if you couldn't hear that, the speaker said that NED, State Department weapons manufacturer hired and backed speaker, said that this guy Robert walked up to her in an airport a while back and asked her similar questions about whether or not she was provoking war with China, which is exactly what she is doing. That's what she's being paid to do, and she knows that's what she's being paid to do as well. So therefore, she's not going to answer his questions because he's not there in good faith, because he questioned her at the airport this one time. So this is what they, apparently now, according to these people's tweets, Robbie is now going to harass and even threateningly walk towards the speaker. So you can make your own judgment here.
Give me a break. I did not read the tweet. Excuse me. Read the tweet. I did not accuse you of that. I reported. I said I don't want war with China. I just quoted you saying I'm at war with China. I did not quote you saying anything else. You can see the tweet online.
So you can see, I'm just going to pause this for 1 second. The tweet is there. She obviously was trying to come up with something to avoid answering the question, and she obviously had to rely on a lie. And I want everybody to note that this is where you stopped. You didn't get any closer. They didn't give you the microphone back, so you stood in the middle to speak, and you're standing there. Now let's see who approaches who as we continue this video.
No. I asked the question. I'd like an answer. Instead, I got attacked.
And for anyone who thinks that he's really, really being threatening here, he's really, really harassing these speakers, he is an Australian citizen, and this is funded by Australian taxpayers. This military think tank gets $47 billion a year from the Australian government. So his taxes and the taxes of a lot of other Australians are going to pay for this. So for her to just say, I don't think you're here in good faith and I refuse to answer your question to the one person at the entire conference who's asking anything remotely critical, who's giving even a little bit of pushback, they're obviously just trying to cover up what they're actually doing, which is pushing for war with China at the behest of weapons contractors and other private interests. And then they're weaponizing this sort of language of social justice, he was harassing us. He was threatening us. We feel unsafe. And it's similar to stuff I've heard when talking about the Uyghur issue, with people accusing me of being misogynistic for not believing survivors, right? And what they're talking about when they say survivors is the World Uyghur Congress funded people like the speaker at this weapons contractors think tank's event, who they hire and prop up and try and, utilize their identity, their Muslim identity or Uyghur identity, to push for regime change, which, the vast majority of Uyghur Muslims obviously don't want. But then, by finding one Uyghur Muslim to say what the weapons contractors want them to say, then they can accuse anybody who's critical of being a harasser, or whatever. When this is literally a military contractor think tank, right? Like, who is the bigger harasser, or like the biggest harassers in the world? People who literally make their money and profit off war. And so, push these pervasive lies, like the one you're seeing here through these think tanks, in order to start more wars and make more money. And then they're acting like people are harassing them when they ask questions. Like, give me a break.
It is censorship. For those who are interested, I've brought along 10 copies of Jacqueline James' legal analysis of the Legal Facade report. And if you're interested, she debunks it completely and thoroughly.
You're an apologist for genocide.
I am not an apologist for genocide. This is a joke. Raising the living standards of people is not. Excuse me?
Sit down.
No, I'm not going to sit down. I've been attacked.
Excuse me. Anyway, you said you're either sit down or
You have to vote it, and Jack has to vote on Monday in Canberra, and he's being voted for that like last
Well,
week, please.
I'd like we'd like a response. You are troublemaking in international affairs.
I'll point out that
Everything-
Robert, you have potentially stalked me before, and
Excuse,
I'd like to ask you to leave, please.
for the record,
He makes such a good point. They're the ones meddling in international affairs, right? They're the ones who should be forced to answer his questions, and instead they're shuffling him out. And if you think about this, the U.S. is using Australia, trying to use Australia as a puppet to attack China. And China is Australia's #1 trading partner in the world, right? So similar to what we've seen in Europe, as all these West European countries have obeyed the U.S. and gone against Russia and sanctioned Russia and cut off even major energy supplies that these West European countries were dependent on in order to try and isolate Russia, it's led to disastrous effects for the working people of these countries, for the masses of these countries. So that's exactly what would happen with Australia if they, were to continue war with China, or try and, cut off trade completely with China, or do whatever the U.S. wants them to do. And, like I said, these organizations, these international organizations, or these NGOs, like the World Uyghur Congress, it's an arm of the NED, which is an arm of the U.S. State Department, right? So this is the U.S. State Department influencing Australian politics, using a private arm of regime change to influence Australian politics and do exactly what he's saying: troublemaking in international affairs. That's exactly what this whole think tank is about. And if you question it, they throw you out, because it's not a real think tank. It's a propaganda outlet.
for the record,
who's approaching?
I was at the taxi rank next to Vicky at Melbourne Airport. I didn't stalk her, I didn't follow her, I recognised her and asked her a question.
and I'm running to you again here today with text
I have
messages.
come to ask you this question, Vicky. That's not stalking, this is a public event.
And I refuse to answer your questions because I do not consider them to be a good thing.
Please leave.
And I do not
Would-
enjoy.
Before I leave, would anyone like a copy of this report?
Please leave.
Would anyone like a copy of this report?
Velcro Factory Direct. What does that mean?
That's so funny. So the report he has in his hand is a 10-page legal report put together by an independent Australian citizen, because he saw the evidence, saw what was going on here, and he had done some business and traveling in China. So he, didn't want war with China, and understands that China is a vital trade partner for Australia. So this guy just put together this 10-page legal document and gave it to Robbie Barwick in the Australian Citizens Party, basically going through every single claim of the NED and the World Uyghur Congress and these weapons contractor think tanks, who are pushing this idea that China is abusing human rights on such a horrendous level that we need to push for regime change. And he's just asking, does anyone want to read this? You'd think that'd be something a military think tank or you know, just a political think tank funded by the Australian government would be very interested in, right? A 10-page legal document put together by a concerned citizen assessing every one of their claims one by one, but they don't read it. They throw them out because they're not looking for people who are critical. It's not a think tank that's looking to think. They're looking to put out propaganda. And earlier I said it's a propaganda outlet. It is, but these like think tanks and NGOs, like the World Uyghur Congress or the NED even, serve a different purpose than like Washington Post or CNN or CNN, MSNBC, Fox News. These guys will put out like evidence similar to like what Human Rights Watch does that then the news outlets will report on. So they'll use this, whatever this military think tank decided, you know, with these Uyghur Muslims who are funded by the World Uyghur Congress connected to the U.S. State Department, rather than ever going and asking the Uyghur Muslims living in China, the vast majority of them, what they actually want. Only these ones propped up by the U.S. State Department. You know, this is used as evidence for China doing human rights abuses. So then Washington Post, CNN, whoever else can just blast over the headlines, China, you know, abusing Muslims, China has putting people in camps, China's doing a genocide, all of these claims based on this evidence that's extremely, extremely, extremely sketchy to the point of being just, you know, almost absolutely fabricated. Although based on some truths, and there, you know, have been, there are things going on in Xinjiang that we can talk about later. Like someone said, Operation Cyclone is alive and well in Xinjiang. That's kind of hints at what I'm talking about. But either way, these think tanks and these NGOs can, you know, create false sources, which then the giant media apparatus picks up and blasts over the headlines. So these things are believed hegemonically. You know, now a lot of people believe China's doing a genocide. I mean, there have been a lot of people also combating this narrative, which is good. People like Daniel Dumbrill. So the U.S. has kind of backed off, it seems like, in many ways. But looks like the narrative and the propaganda is alive and well in Australia. So the bourgeois hasn't given up the fight there to convince people that war with China is somehow going to be good for the Australian citizens.
That's it. That's what the fuss was about. A question.
I have to accuse you of censorship now, Dan. You left off the duel at the end where I'm called a drama queen.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's right. You know what's interesting? Before you start explaining, I was the one who subtitled that video, as you know, and when people, it got a lot of traction because people realized how disconnected it was from what people were saying, and they didn't want people to see that. Now, Twitter has a partnership with ASPI for various things, yes. And when people started sharing my tweet, this is.
Also, he just said the name, the abbreviated name of this military think tank. It's called the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, ASPI. ASPI. They named their think tank ASPI, like diarrhea. So, I mean, I guess that's fitting.
This is how it showed up for everybody. This tweet is unavailable. They weren't even letting people see this. I don't know if you noticed that, but anyways, why don't you tell us a little bit about how things unfolded and very importantly too, the implications of the question you were asking. That was a completely valid question. So walk us through a little bit about how this whole thing happened.
All right. Well, Jacqueline James has written a report on Debunking the Uyghurs for Sale report, which was written by ASPI, the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, in 2020. And Vicky Hsu is the lead author of that ASPI report. And I wanted to show this early, Daniel, if I can just share my screen for briefly.
And actually, while we're doing that, while I look for the request to come up, maybe get into explaining where that was exactly. For people who aren't aware, ASPI, we're making the assumption everybody knows what it is. It's a think tank in Australia that's funded by weapons manufacturers in the U.S. State Department.
Well, it's actually majority funded by the Australian government, so it's the Australian taxpayer. And Jacqueline James and I are Australian citizens.
I looked this up today, and he's going into what I was talking about. Like, he's an Australian tax-paying citizen, so he should be able to ask them questions because they're funded by the Australian government. So I was doing some research on it. It's $47 billion a year. So, you know, plus the money they're getting from U.S. NGOs and the involvement by the NED and World Uyghur Congress, which are incredibly well-funded, you know, arms of regime change in the U.S. State Department. So not only is it the U.S. influencing Australian politics, But it's funded directly by the Australian government. $47 billion. $47 billion Australian taxpayers are giving this basically U.S. Weapons contractor think tank to tell them that they should go to war with China, this country who has never, ever, ever, ever meddled in Australian affairs or ever, ever, ever threatened Australia, who is Australia's #1 trade partner. And now they're really trying to convince the Australian citizens, this think tank that gets $47 billion a year from Australian taxpayers, that they should go to war with China because China's committing human rights abuses that are just too beyond the pale. So beyond the pale that we have to sanction them and starve them and bomb them, because when we do human rights abuses, it's to stop other human rights abuses. So it's A-OK.
And we are concerned that something that we fund as taxpayers is producing false information. On top of that's what's called the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. It's funded by the Defence Department. On top of that, the more extraordinary part of its funding is it takes a massive amount of funding from the United States State Department, as well as money from the British government, the Japanese government, and then a lot of weapons manufacturers fund it as well. And actually, it's based in Canberra, the capital city of Australia. And Canberra is a city that when you fly into Canberra in the airport, you see these big billboards for weapons manufacturers, right? There's a lot of influence from those interests in that town. ASPI is their main propaganda. We call it a propaganda outlet, and I use that term deliberately. Our organisation, which is what I want to show in a second, my party, the Citizens Party, we're a political party. We have been debunking ASPI claims going back at least to 2016 and even earlier. But I say 2016 because that's when it really started to ramp up. And you and I talked before on a previous discussion we had about one of the more ridiculous claims it made was in 2016. We did a census, the 5-yearly census, but for the first time did it online, and the system failed. And straight away, ASPI came out and blamed China. Oh, we were hacked by China. We were hacked by China. And 2 weeks later, it was acknowledged that no, a modem hadn't been turned on. But this is how.
Right.
That's what they should have done. I don't know if people know, during the Iowa primary, I remember because I was working for Bernie, and we were expected to win Iowa, but the vote counting app, which was designed by a company called Shadow, who were directly working with the Pete Buttigieg campaign, Bernie's main competitor in Iowa, malfunctioned while they were counting the votes, and then Pete declared himself the winner. The Bernie campaign should have said that, I don't know who, Jair Bolsonaro and the Republicans were, they hacked us. It was those darn right-wingers abroad. They hacked us. It was the neoliberals again. Just like the military think tanks always blame China. Oh, we forgot to plug our modem in, but actually it was China. So let's talk about what actually is going on in Xinjiang, because I see it's more of an enhanced Patriot Act being enforced in Xinjiang. I mean, that's honestly, that's a fair way to describe it, I feel like. There is pretty strict surveillance in Xinjiang. Well, I guess it's not the enhanced Patriot Act, because the Patriot Act is, the U.S. saying we're going to spy on your cell phones so that we can fight terrorism. And then, as Edward Snowden showed everyone, it was actually just the NSA spying on people the U.S. government didn't like, spying on people sort of willy-nilly without having a reason to, and, enforcing imperialism and censoring people who call out imperialism. So it's not quite the Patriot Act, because China's surveillance was actually to combat these really horrible terrorist attacks, such as the Urumqi riots, which led to 140 people dead. And there were some horrible sights, like extremists running around in the streets with severed heads and stuff like this. And going back to what someone else had said in the chat earlier, they said Operation Cyclone is alive and well in Xinjiang. So what do they mean by that? Operation Cyclone was the U.S. operation in Afghanistan in the Middle East, which famously armed and funded Osama bin Laden and his extremist group, the Mujahideen, because they were fighting against the Soviet Union. And not only that, but there was a leaked CIA document that said hope lay in the Muslim revival. And what the CIA meant by that was a lot of Muslim people and Muslim groups were moving to the left, moving more towards socialism or anti-imperialism, anti-Western interventionism. So what the U.S. and the CIA did then to counter that was back any right-wing group they could, any jihadist group, any extremist group who existed in the region. give them political support, call them freedom fighters like they did with the Mujahideen, give them arms. And this has had lasting effects, not just on Afghanistan, but that whole region for years since. So now there's this group in Xinjiang, China, called the ETIM, which is basically a separatist extremist group who has guns from when the U.S. was arming and funding the Mujahideen and these other extremist groups. Recently, as the U.S. has been trying to do their regime change in China, they took the ETIM off the list of terrorist groups recognized by the U.S., which allowed the ETIM to begin recruiting again, really increase their operations, which is partially what led to the terror attacks and hundreds of people dead. So that is the context in which China has increased surveillance in Xinjiang, right? And then after the U.S. creates this whole mess, which China then has to come in and try and clean up, and do it, try and do it while respecting people's political and human rights, then the U.S. comes in and starts talking about how China's doing a genocide, when they were the ones who started this whole mess by funneling arms and weapons and money into Osama bin Laden because it was politically convenient. But yeah, there's a little historical context for people. We haven't talked about this issue or Xinjiang in a while since Daniel Dumbrill was making political videos like a year ago or so. So it's good to rehash it now that this sort of narrative is being pushed again in Australia, especially.
Operates. That has zero rigor. It is the least professional research organization on the planet. I could not have greater contempt for them than I'm trying to express now. These people are pathetic in the extreme. They only get, there's only two reasons they have traction. They seem to be a professional outfit backed by the Australian government, and they have created the climate of McCarthyism, McCarthyism is all about prejudice. And the prejudice that they have incited in Australia and around the world induces people to accept their claims without question. So this was an article, what you're seeing here is from our website. We wrote this in our publication, one of our researchers wrote it in October 2020, just after Vicky Shu's ASPI report came out. Our researcher went through it and said, they make all these claims, you check their own footnotes and their own sources, and they have deliberately interpreted all those things in extreme bad faith, completely.
And I went ahead and read a handful of this and the other 10-page report that they compiled. They're really good and really accessible, and they really, investigate the claims of ASPI, and the imperialists about Uyghurs, which is what I love so much about Daniel Dumbrill. He really, if there was a genocide, he would be interested in finding out about it, knowing about it, and doing something about it, but his investigations have just led him to the fact of the matter, which is that this is mostly U.S. meddling, meddling in international affairs and doing this sort of new Cold War strategy with Russia and China. But yeah, this would be a good thing to send people. Someone asked us on the stream yesterday, how do you convince people who, won't listen to evidence about the Uyghur thing, because there's so many, mainstream outlets pushing this idea, and so many people have sort of anti-China mindsets. This would be actually a good thing to show people, a good thing to send people, because these documents from the Australian Citizens Party really goes through the claims of ASPI. I know it's probably better for Australians. I know we have some Australians in our audience. Shout out to Debbie if you're watching, but even for Americans, I don't know. It depends on who you're talking to. Some Americans will be like, I'm not reading some thing from Australia, but I don't know. Maybe you're not going to convince people like that China's good anyways. That's not true. We can convince anyone. Everyone is an anti-imperialist at heart. People don't want to go around the world bullying other countries.
Completely misrepresented in many cases, what those sources are, etc. Right? That was a week's work by one researcher in our office in 2020. So in early 2021, I met Jack James, and Jack hadn't done her report then, and we were discussing this Uyghurs for Sale report, and I showed Jack what our researcher had done. But then Jack went and did this incredible body of work. Just an Australian citizen who has, because she worked in China and has a connection to China and a strong sense that there was no proof for these claims. Jack went and did a legal analysis of the Uyghurs for Sale report to say you're alleging forced labor, which is a crime under international law, but it's defined. Does what you're alleging meet the definition of what you're saying? And you've read the report. A lot of people read the report. It is devastating. She just shows in page after page after page it doesn't meet the legal definition. And then she goes and does something even more thorough than we did in our one-page article, which was just go through case after case after case of what they cited and said, this is misrepresented, this is misrepresented, this is.
And the Gray Zone has also done this with a lot of the works of Adrian Zenz, who's one of the main people in the U.S. He's a right-wing anti-China fanatic who's also a Christian fundamentalist and literally thinks he's on a mission from God to destroy China. And that's where that's who a lot of the American media cites about China and Xinjiang is this, the reports from this fundamentalist. And Gray Zone has gone through them step by step. These guys have gone through ASPI step by step. So I've got a question here. Any media I pick up just shits on China. What's a good outlet for China news? Alternative media, so like Consortium News is a really good journalistic outlet I like. The Gray Zone, like I said, who debunks Adrian Zenz. These reports here from the Australian Citizens Party I would check out. I would check out all of Daniel Dumbrill's videos, honestly. But then, like, if you can just read like CGTN too, and it's China state media, but then you're just going to get, you know, the pro-China spin. Because in the U.S., like you said, every media you pick up shits on China. Our media is hegemonically against China, pro-war with China. You know, their media is not going to just shit on China all the time the same way. And, you know, it is going to be biased, but so is ours. So you can, you know, read two biased forms of news and sort of find the truth in both of them. So, yeah, I would recommend people read CGTN. Plus, it's just good. Like, you know, there are state-run media outlets like CGTN and Telesur who do amazing work and amazing reporting. You know, just because they're run by the government doesn't mean it's all censorship and, you know, there's not going to be great journalism. Telesur is one of the best journalistic outlets in the world. Venezuela's media. There's so many good journalists who work for Venezuela where they're, you know, they can get funding and support, unlike the U.S. corporate media where they're blackballed. So, you know, because the best journalists in the world, the journalists who actually tell the truth, which is supposed to be what the profession is about, are blackballed from U.S. corporate media. Sometimes they go to, you know, state media, work for outlets like RT or whatever. That doesn't automatically make people corrupt. So, yeah, I'd read CGTN too. There's other outlets. Instead of bombing Arabs for 30 years, China gave them education and jobs. The CIA said, look, China is oppressing Muslims. That's the other thing. Like, look at the historical context. Like, you really think the U.S. cares about Muslim people now? After this, you know, 20-year-long officially, but at least 30-year-long really war on terror where the U.S. has just been dropping bombs. I mean, I shouldn't even say 30 years long. The U.S. has been meddling in the Middle East forever. They did a coup in Iran in 1953 of Mohammad Mossadegh, or has been meddling in Muslim majority countries forever. But yeah, now the U.S. cares about Muslims, and they just happen to care about Muslims in China, a country and a government that they want to overthrow. Like, give me a break. Whereas China is doing developmental loans in Muslim majority countries. Syria just joined the Belt and Road Initiative to try and develop infrastructure after the U.S.-backed dirty war, covert war, which split Syria, divided it, and the U.S. is still occupying the oil fields. So you're going to act like China, you know, is oppressing Muslim people, but not the U.S., and the U.S. are the heroic ones. It's ridiculous. When we have socialism, do we all have to wear cool sweaters like Eddie? Yes. Yes, you will all be getting these carbon copies, and we'll all wear them. That's actually what socialism is, and the government takes all your other sweaters. Sorry, I don't make the rules. Marx Carlson did.
Is misrepresented, and it's absolutely devastating. The thing is, though, that Jack produced that last year, or no, earlier this year, and of course we've had this 2-year pandemic.
Sorry, I meant to bring this up earlier, but I forgot to. Truth Teller, Free Thinker, check out the new Atlas on YouTube. Yes, I am a big fan of the new Atlas. They do great work. That's Brian Berletic, right? And I see you've been dropping a lot of truth bombs about China and the Uyghurs. And it seems like your profile picture is the Falun Gong logo, if I'm not mistaken. And it's X'd out. those who don't know, the Falun Gong is sort of like a right-wing cult. Mostly exists outside of China, I believe, in Canada and the U.S. But they do tons of anti-China propaganda. They're also weirdly connected to QAnon. And they've gotten a lot of funding and support from the U.S. State Department. But they're basically behind Epoch Times, EPOCH. That's basically the propaganda arm of the Falun Gong. This like right-wing cult. And the Epoch Times are everywhere. You know, you'll see, I mean, I don't know about anymore, but back in the day, I saw Epoch Times advertisements everywhere. And they're some of the main people behind this, you know, anti-China narrative. So very interesting to follow when you follow the money and look at all the different groups who are involved. And then once you start to identify, what I noticed, once you start to identify all the different groups who are involved with pushing this stuff, at least about China, this is one I've studied pretty thoroughly, like the U.S. propaganda effort against China, at least. All of the reports from mainstream media, like I said, cite the same sources. They cite ASPI, or they cite Adrian Zenz, or they cite Epoch Times. And, you know, once you do the research, you see all these are connected to weapons contractors or the U.S. State Department or the Australian State Department. And yeah, it just makes it really easy to see through the propaganda, and it makes it really easy to see how they make these lies so widely believed. Like, oh, you have these giant propaganda outlets that everyone reads and trusts, like the New York Times, and they just pick up these fake reports from State Department think tanks or thinkers like Adrian Zenz. Yep, I destroyed them, the newspapers. Yeah, they would stand, the Falun Gong would like hand people newspapers about how China's harvesting organs. How about you Falun D's and nuts? Nice. Falun Gong showed up at January 6th. Yeah, so did like Cuban and Venezuelan gusanos, and Iranian monarchists. All these like far right groups who the CIA has backed to do regime change over the years showed up at the Capitol riots because they're still like far right people. So a lot of them are like Trump people or QAnon people. And, you know, these are the kind of people who the CIA and the U.S. media will be like, these are freedom fighters. You know, they're fighting against authoritarian communist regimes. But then when they're in America, you know, they're participating in the Capitol riots because that's their politics, like far right extremism. And then the media has an aneurysm about it. Oh, this is the worst thing ever. Can you believe it? An attempted coup in America. I'm like, oh, who could believe it? America, the country that does like 70 coups a minute. Finally got a taste of its own medicine. Literally, because the Falun Gong and these CIA-backed groups were at the Capitol riots, it was literally like the U.S. getting a taste of their own medicine in a way. Or these far-right extremists that we've sent to destabilize or used to destabilize other countries all around the world. We're now destabilizing our country.
And there's been no real public events process whereby you could go and participate in these ASPI events. So now ASPI has started holding events again. So that was what you just saw in that video was, it's now the 25th of August. So it was the 17th of August, Wednesday night here in Melbourne. I'm in Melbourne. And on the Monday night, Jacqueline James had gone to an ASPI event in Canberra to ask her own variation of questions based on her report. My question was strategic. And might I say, it's the only reason there's film, the only reason there's video, because I did not repeatedly interrupt Vicky, as the mainstream media article that came out last night said, and misrepresented me as having done. I had one question, and that question was, I wanted to see if Vicky Xu would take credit for her report having cost Uyghurs their jobs because multinational manufacturers had withdrawn from supply chains that use Uyghur labor.
That was a really good and strategic question. To ask how many manufacturing centers have been shut down because of policies they supported. Because that's ultimately what sanctions will do, right? And that's what the U.S. is calling for. Sanction places using forced Uyghur labor. Well, that's just going to cost Uyghur people their jobs, right? Those sanctions are just going to stop exports and imports from coming out of places where Uyghur people live and hurt the economy like sanctions always do. You know, sanctions don't ever help working people. Why would it be any different this time? So that was a good strategic question, like you said. And it's just it makes me so mad, especially with, you know, you can tell that I know that Daniel Dumbrill is like a really good guy and someone who kind of got dragged into politics more than he jumped into it, even though his work on politics is great. And Robbie Barwick seems to be a good guy too, and really, focused on doing the right thing and trying to get to the truth and really concerned with it. I don't know maybe not. Maybe he's totally corrupt and the worst guy ever. But either way, the mainstream media then smears and tries to destroy the reputation of any journalist or any person telling the truth. Right? And this is what they've done with the gray zone journalists for years. Just smear, personal attack, and even weaponizing the language of social justice, right? Like, these are harassers. This is a man harassing a woman, not a citizen questioning a weapons contractor think tank, or a State Department funded think tank. And then I've experienced it on TikTok. So, I mean, not on TikTok, I guess. That was where I first experienced it, but everywhere. You're a genocide denier. I probably get called a genocide denier every single day. It's like, look, if there was evidence of a genocide, I would not deny it. I would be, the first person to be concerned about it and calling attention to it. But it's just not there when you look at the evidence. When you break this stuff down and when you look at, like the legal reports put together by this independent Australian citizen that I read this morning. If you read real investigations, real rigorous academic investigations of these claims and these reports from the think tanks and the likes of Adrian Zenz, they fall apart under any kind of scrutiny. But then they'll smear you. They'll just say genocide denier, and say it over and over and over again with enough volume that people believe it. And they try and attack people's reputations and turn them into a joke because they know they don't have the truth on their side. These think tanks know they're lying. These arms of the NED and the State Department know they're lying. They know they're doing the bidding of weapons contractors who profit off war. So they're not going to try and engage on the arguments. If you try and ask them questions, they're going to shut you down. They're going to kick you out like they did to Robbie Barwick. And then the mainstream media is going to attack your reputation and smear you and try and make you seem like the most evil person ever and weaponize people's compassion to think that you're just this monster. Make them think that you're just this monster who thinks genocide is awesome. They're terrorist deniers, literally. I've been called a genocide denier. My father-in-law worked in Xinjiang for years. That's how ridiculous it is. And it's by people who know nothing of the history of the region, who know nothing of U.S. involvement in the region, couldn't tell you what Operation Cyclone was, couldn't tell you about the Urumqi riots or the terrorist attacks in early 2010s through like 2014, which have stopped, by the way. So not, China, you can criticize their policies for their surveillance policies in Xinjiang to combat the terrorist attacks that were happening. But there haven't been any really bad terrorist attacks since then. I mean, ultimately, it's worked in keeping their people safe and protecting from U.S. interventionism. So, yeah. All right. So, yeah, shout out to Daniel Dumbrill. I hope he keeps making videos. Everyone go subscribe to Daniel. Comment on that video and say, Daniel, we need you. Eddie and Carlos can't do it on their own. Danny Haifong and the Friends of Socialist China can't do it on their own. Vijay Prashad. We need your help in spreading the truth and exposing imperialist lies. So I saw a report claiming they had and were reporting on Chinese governmental papers that talked about Uyghurs, saying there are 2+ million locked up, etc. The article had a disclaimer in it saying none of these papers could be verified. I saw people sharing it around saying how it's undeniable proof of genocide. Yeah. Like Vosh did like a research stream where he tried to prove the Uyghur thing, and he basically just looked at like a few mainstream media outlets who were saying things like that, and saying, look, see, See, New York Times said it. Which shows his lack of critical thinking and lack of ability to analyze media critically or in a Marxist way at all. But yeah, good conversation. And that we have made progress on this issue. I tell you all what, the fact that my chat isn't blowing up right now with people saying, I'm going to unsubscribe and unfollow, you're a genocide denier, how could you do this? You're just a fake socialist who loves authoritarian regimes. The fact that nobody's saying that shows how far we've come, because that's what it used to be like in any leftist circles. When you would start talking about how maybe China isn't doing a genocide, people would jump down your throats and call you, or jump down your throat and call you a genocide denier, even if you said it in the most like rational way, unbiased way. 2 million Muslims locked up and not one boatload of refugees. Seems sus. Yeah, it's crazy. Nobody's fleeing. Historically, anytime there's a genocide going on, people flee en masse, you know. Maybe they banned them all, the refugee boats. Maybe. That seems like a legitimate possibility. Let's watch this. Actually, I want to talk about something quick that happened in our Discord, which people have been asking me to comment on. Alexander Dugin's daughter, Daria Dugina, who was killed potentially. Now there's reports saying it might have been the Ukrainian secret police attempting to kill Dugin, believing him to really be the right-hand man of Putin, like Western media has said, or sort of the brains of Putin. But that's far from the truth. I was watching an interview that the Gray Zone did that everyone should check out with a colleague of Alexander Dugin's today. And, you know, Alexander Dugin nor his daughter have ever met Putin. And their political party that they started had about 2% support in Russia, if that. And actually, they were pointing out that Moscow and Putin had pushed to ban Dugin, or push Dugin out of his spot at a Moscow university, because Dugin was criticizing Putin and Moscow for not entering the Donbass sooner, for not doing a special military operation in Ukraine sooner. So you see how, you know, when you look at the complexities of what was actually going on, you know, and what actually Dugin actually means as a thinker and a political figure in Russia, it's so far removed from the Western media, who claims he's literally the brain of Putin pushing this, you know, Russian nationalism. But he is an influential thinker. And as I said, you know, his ideas they're not Marxist, they're anti-Marxist. He believes that fascism, liberalism, and Marxism have all failed. So now we need to, you know, piece together the good parts of all of them, to put together a politics in the 21st century. I don't agree with his politics, but, you know, he said some interest. I guess I haven't read it, but, you know, some of the stuff he said seems kind of interesting. But either way, I wasn't even going to talk about it really, other than just saying, you know, the basic, this is how Western media is telling broad lies about Dugin. He's not Putin's brain. And then just saying it's really sad that, you know, a father had to watch his daughter die like that. But then there were people, synthetic leftists, coming into our Discord server, the Midwestern Marx Discord, and sharing memes mocking Alexander Dugin in this moment where he was watching his daughter die, like, from a car explosion that was intended for him. Probably like a nightmare scenario he's going to be living with for the rest of his life. There's a chance he'll never experience, you know, joy in the same way ever again, after seeing something so horrific and traumatizing. And, you know, just having people coming in our Discord and seeing like the Marxist-Leninists, the people who I know are part of our core fan base, aren't supporting Dugin, aren't saying they're Duginites, aren't pushing Dugin's theory. They were just asking questions like, what do you think about the killing of his daughter? What does this mean in terms of geopolitics? And these leftists are mocking them, you know, calling everybody in the Discord server Duginites, posting memes about it. It's like, this is just so sick on a human level. Like, how can you act like, you know, working class people all just have these backwards ideas and they're unapproachable, and they can much of the American class is just inherently reactionary, and they can never be won over because they're so evil and they're so violent and they have such hatred in their hearts, or such racism in them. And then you're posting memes like mocking a dad watching his daughter die by a car bomb. Like, who's really got hatred in their hearts, right? Who's really bought into the ideology that's a death cult? That's what liberalism is, and this sort of rad lib fake Marxism that masquerades as Marxism while calling people like us tankies and authoritarian socialists. I don't know. It's just, I couldn't believe it. It was like, this is everything the like rad lib pseudo leftist pseudo Marxist, I guess, woke, for lack of a better word, ideology. This is everything it's about, right? We can't have serious conversations about something that happened in the world. I'm just going to accuse certain people of being Duginites and therefore fascists, and then make light of the situation, make memes about the situation that are making fun of other people's pain. Like, that's just the synthetic left right there for you in our Discord. And some people in our Discord were reaching out to me like, that was extremely dark. And I'm like, yeah, it was dark. But, yeah, so I just wanted to say that. That's my thoughts on that situation. But on to better things, better topics, more pleasant. I have this video. This is one of my favorite videos of all time. It's an oil rig in the North Sea off the coast of, I can't remember exactly where the North Sea is. It's technically like, I think this is a British oil rig. This is just really cool. We talk, like, I see TikToks or news stories even, or posts on social media all the time about Jeff Bezos and about all these rich people and their yachts. Like, what did Jeff Bezos got a yacht recently that was so big he had to have another yacht, like a support yacht, just to hold it up? That is lame. But what's not lame is these workers getting paid $15 an hour or whatever to be on this extremely dangerous oil rig. So let's just watch this. This is much cooler than any video of a billionaire on a yacht. Those things are insane. They're so crazy. Someone says no one on an oil rig is making $15 an hour. That's very true. Yeah, I thought that after I said it, but still underpaid, exploited, not making nearly as much as the oil companies. But look at that, just getting tossed around by the waves. And there was the Alpha Piper. Was that the name of it? One of these things blew up in the UK, and it was one of the biggest mass deaths due to an accident in the history of the United Kingdom. Was it moving? I can't tell if it's moving or if it just looks like that because of the waves. But either way, that would be so scary to go out there, which, it really shows the capitalists who own the oil companies are like the Koch brothers. People who have literally never worked a day in their lives, have inherited their massive oil empires from their parents. And have used those oil empires to push right-wing pro-oil company politics for years. And they make all the decisions, they get all the wealth, they get all the benefits, and they don't have to work all day at all. They just shuffle paper around and get the vast majority of the wealth that comes from this. Which oil, a commodity, is like the most vital commodity to the modern economy. It makes everything run. And these are the workers risking their lives, literally risking their lives in something that looks like it's out of a movie on this oil rig. And they're getting exploited, and we're told that, oh, that's not skilled work, or, that's just an easy job. Anybody could do that. the capitalist is the one who really pulled himself up by his bootstraps. Like, how? Then you don't know about the Koch family. The Koch family is a bunch of really rich brothers who own oil companies that they got from their dad. Right? They don't go out on these oil rigs and work hard. They didn't go out here and work every single day and save up their wages and eventually start their own business and their own oil company. Their dad gave them a giant monopolized conglomerate of an oil company. And people have out on these oil rigs risking their lives have made them bajillions and bajillions of dollars. And we can no longer allow it to happen. Society rests on the labor of people like these workers on the oil rig. I think there's only one Koch brother now. Oh, yeah, I think a bunch of them have died now. Sad, but they will be missed. In the middle of nowhere, that image, how long it would take to get help out there. Right. Yeah, that's the other thing. Like, that's what I think I like so much about that video is it's like claustrophobic. It's like, holy crap, you're really trapped out there on the ocean. It looks like you're in the middle of nowhere. And when the Alpha Piper storm happened, the accident happened, there was like a gas leak and an explosion. It did take a while to get out there to people. And I think that's part of why everybody died. Unreal ego on some people. Yeah, you know what's unreal, though? The lack of spelling that some right-wing reactionaries have in my Twitch chat. Unreal it is. Yanmi Park lies. What's up? Or lies like eating people and eating rats by Yami Park. Yeah, that's my favorite Yami Park line ever. Well, that was when she was talking to Jordan Peterson, right? The greatest intellectual in American history, the greatest intellectual of our times. She was like, yeah, in North Korea, it's just a constant cycle. The people eat the rats eat the people, and then the people eat the rats again. It's like, I don't think that's physically possible. I don't know how Jordan Peterson, someone who's supposed to be a genius, couldn't figure that out. But I guess that's the power of American propaganda, isn't it? Let's watch one more. Actually, should we do this or should we save this? We're gonna save that. I have a Gus Hall video of him back when he was running for president, but we'll save that next time we're on with Carlos. Jordan Peterson is an ideologue. Yeah, he is. He is a bourgeois ideologue, and I think it's important and even interesting to study his theory because what he's identified as postmodern neo-Marxism, which is apparently at the core of everything evil in society, is basically the Frankfurt School. These like CIA propped up pseudo-Marxists who are basically radical liberals. So what he's criticizing ultimately is liberalism and the development of liberalism to its current stage. Without criticizing capitalism, without criticizing the core of liberalism. She claimed the rat ate people and they ate the rats because they are so hungry. Yes. It's very sad. It's very sad that the North Korean people have decided to allow Kim Jong-un to feed them rats all the time. That's very interesting how a whole society of people decided that they were okay with just eating rats, but that's the power of communism. Jordan Peterson uses postmodernism to criticize postmodern neo-Marxism. Basically, yes. That's basically what it ends up being. So he's just twisted himself up at a circle. Gus Hall was a great guy. When I came to the U.S., I talked to him. He was a true communist. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. He was a great guy. That's cool that you got to meet him. DPRK is the most advanced communist nation. China might be the most successful, but the DPRK is the most based. The most based. Top 10 most based countries. Eat rat or starve to death? A common question most communists have to answer in their lifetime. Yes. So not only did Yeonmi Park and Jordan Peterson say that communism means eating rats, but now this random guy in the Twitch chat who has been leaving troll comments for like an hour because I guess he doesn't have any friends or a job or anything better to do. So now we know it's true. Communists eat rats. Thank you for letting us know. None of us are communists anymore, thanks to all of the brilliant points that you have made in the Twitch chat. Nobody here thinks that you're actually just super dumb and embarrassing. You are very smart. Please continue. Thoughts on Angola election results? Thank you very much for the super chat. Appreciate your financial support. I have not seen what happened in Angola, but I can look it up for you and try and give you my comments, my surface level comments. Angola ruling party close to victory in decisive election. Nearly final results show ex-Marxist MPLA with solid lead. MPLA is ruled over its opposition. Yeah, I know like literally nothing about Angola's politics. So MPLA is the ruling party and they're ex-Marxist. Heavy oil producing nation. Yeah, I don't know. It's something I'll have to do more research into. Sorry, I can't give you a better answer, but no investigation, no right to speak. You feel me? Money and viewers, yes. Communism has already won. I like it. What do you think about Brezhnev? Yeah, another tough question that I just haven't studied that era of the USSR closely enough to really give a good answer to that. Yeah, they suck Dems now. Better than UNITA. Mao has the best quotes. He does. That's why they created a whole book, a whole red book called Mao's Quotations. There's like, this dude's quotes are fire. Put it in a book. Give it to the people. We'll have communism in no time. But it wasn't true by Yeonmi Park. Yes, we know that Yeonmi Park is a liar. Is there a Discord server? Yes, we do have a Discord server. The Midwestern Marks Discord. The Little Red Book, absolutely. Brezhnev was okay because he tried to stop the Balkanization of USSR. Than that, man, Balkanization is effing awful. Yeah, I mean, it was a human rights disaster. Human rights disaster for pretty much every former Soviet country. Even the ones who didn't, obviously they didn't have the ideal system before. They had been dealing with internal contradictions as well as external contradictions, combating imperialism, various things. But after the neoliberal shock therapy that was induced on them by the U.S. and all the state-run industry was sold off to Western corporations, people experienced unemployment at like 20% in a lot of these countries who hadn't experienced unemployment at all in the past, however many years and generations, because you always had a job with the state. So can't believe Gorbachev's still alive. You'd think he would have turned into like Pizza the Hut by now from eating all that pizza. People know who Pizza the Hut is from Spaceballs. This is Gorbachev. That boy ate so much Pizza Hut after the fall of the Soviet Union that he turned into Pizza the Hut. And he ate himself. So, R.I.P. In 1970, economic stagnation. Oh, hey, you accidentally. I know you didn't mean to do this on purpose, because you're a moron, but you accidentally brought up a good point. Too bad all socialist Marxists are guidance counselors and have no practical knowledge on how to make anything work. Practical knowledge on running industry is something that's necessary under socialism. Is something that's very useful, and is something that I think is lacking from the U.S. left, because the U.S. left is highly disconnected from the working class. But any successful socialist or communist movement has come from not just the proletariat, but largely also from the industrial. I shouldn't say every socialist or communist movement, because Venezuela has been a lot of community organizing rather than just straight up proletarian organizing. But a lot of socialist and communist revolutions, especially the Russian Revolution, were driven by the proletariat as the revolutionary class, because the idea is that the proletarians do understand how to run industry. They're the ones who are working those productive jobs day in and day out. So they're the ones who have the technical knowledge on how to run it, much more so than capitalists. And this has, been proven by studies. Most innovations in the workplace come from very close to production, where the product's actually being produced, rather than from top down, from, Elon Musk just thinking up new innovations or whatever else. So practical knowledge is important in being in understanding how to run industry. Is important, but most of the great Marxist leaders of all time haven't been guidance counselors. They have been proletarian workers who work directly with industry. So I guess you just didn't know that history, but now you know, so you won't make that mistake again. And I have done a lot of manual labor, including working concrete. So yeah, I can figure out how I can run the concrete industry under socialism. So I know you didn't know that about me either, that I had worked in productive industry, but now you do, so you won't have to sound so stupid next time you say something. So I hope this was helpful. I'm a plumber. At least I don't know how that works. Absolutely. Plumbers are part of that that sort of industrial proletariat that keeps the infrastructure running. And it's so crazy that that's a job that's like looked down on, right? Oh, you're a plumber. Like, yeah, what are you going to do without plumbers? I have yet to meet a socialist guidance counselor. Yeah, I don't know. I think our friend just made that one up in their head. They seem to have a lot of delusions. Also, that spy who followed Marx and said he just sleeps all day and works all night and whenever he wants. That's me. Yes. I was thinking about that today. I like couldn't sleep this morning, and I was up at 4 a.m. Reading about ASPI, this military think tank, and all its connections to the various state departments and various weapons contractors. And I'm like, oh, it's like Marx, that one spy who said, he'll just, work at the most random times whenever he's motivated. Like, if the CIA is spying on me right now, he gets up at 4 a.m. to study Australian think tanks and then goes back to sleep and then goes to wrestling practice. Jordan Peterson is the guidance counselor for capitalism. Oh, that's such a good analogy. Like, clean your room, do all these things, and just be a man and tough out all those feelings of alienation and the crushing weight of trying to support yourself and support your family economically while being exploited every day. Just make sure your room is clean and just tough it out and be a man. That's Jordan Peterson's guidance counseling for capitalism. I'm a big fan of Daniel Dumbrill. I am as well. Yeah, shout out to him. I'm glad he's doing new videos now. Hey, yo, you the guy from TikTok? Yeah, technically. Follow us on TikTok at Midwestern Marks. Isn't central planning the same? Why didn't workers and control their workplaces in the Soviet Union? Yugoslavia did better, in my opinion, when it comes to organization of the workplace. I think there are multiple reasons for that, but we don't need to get into a long talk about the Soviet Union right now. I gotta head out. Got some stuff to do this afternoon. This was a great midday hour 15 stream. had a lot of people on here, so looks like this is not a bad time slot for people. Trying to get more consistent with that, but might be on with Carlos again tonight, might not. We'll see what he's doing. But anyways, thank you all for being here. Thanks for the super chats. Patreon.com/MidwesternMarks if you want to super support us. Yeah. Thank you very much. Peace, everyone.